I'd like to begin by just asking you to think about how many URLs are within your campus domain. This came up for us last fall at UCSD because we got a request to identify how many sites or what sites were using Facebook's metapixel on their website. And well, it seemed to me in my naivety that that should be easy. Somebody should have a list. That was definitely not the case. So we managed to generate lists, but we weren't able to come up with any kind of high level of confidence that this was the true number of lists and we could use it to identify where the metapixel was. And so it wasn't, unfortunately, until, or rather fortunately, until Lucy connected us with Little Forest that does sophisticated web crawling to identify web domains, that we discovered that at UCSD there are over 40,000 subdomains associated with our top level domain, which is a pretty staggering number, right? I mean, that's how do you sort of face that? So initially, once we got over the shock, we started taking a look at, what are all these sites? And of course, many of them are, printers or just something that wasn't really returning anything. But there were sites from, events from 10 years ago or researchers that were no longer with us. And well, ultimately, maybe it's not a big deal that they're out there. It really is a big deal, right? We're responsible for those sites at the end of the day. But we had to ask ourselves, how did this happen? And it's because, we've been handing out domains like it's the wild, wild west. Unless, of course, you're born after 1975, and it's because we've been handing them out like it's the wild, wild west. So let me tell you, you're getting old when your little presentation joke requires a reference to a 20-year-old movie and a 50-year-old TV series. So suddenly the retirement home doesn't seem so theoretical. But really, it's because getting domain names is ultimately quite easy, right? There's not really regulated. They're not controlled or monitored. Any professor or org can request a subdomain. And ultimately, not every request goes through the host master. So nobody's really aware of what these things all are. And, this really is a huge problem, right? This has impacts on governance, security, privacy, and accessibility. And at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Lucy to expand on some of these topics.
So first of all, I want to just quickly ask, if you're not from Berkeley, because I know the answer from Berkeley, I just want to know what the answer is at other campuses. How many DNS administrators do you think you have on your campuses? And just yell them out because I can't see those hands. DNS, domain name registration, somebody who can actually hand out the name of a website.
It's also referred to as
Hostmaster, yeah. We don't use Hostmaster anymore. Yeah, exactly. So how many do you think you have on your campuses? Are you positive? Are you absolutely sure? Because I can guarantee you have at least 5.
That's it, but I report 1 group ahead of me.
And I bet that there are people on campus who actually have their own administrators, and it just goes on and on. So at Berkeley, turns out we have 12. We have 12 individuals, and they don't communicate very regularly, and there's no means of tracking all those website names, and there's no means of knowing, what happens when a program shuts down and a program doesn't exist anymore. And maybe the website that DNS is on, sorry, I'm going to use the term DNS because it's the term I should be using. It stands for domain name. What happens if that's just a server that's, in a back room somewhere that's still running and nobody bothered to shut it down? It stays there forever and ever. So for example, one of the sites we found at the very top of our list was a site that literally said in the footer of the page, this program was shut down in 1999. And the website's still active. And we were very lucky that that website hadn't been hijacked in some way for, crypto distribution or the most frequent problem that you have to worry about with things like that is that our campus sites that are insecure and that, may be around for a really long time, the biggest issue with those is that you end up distributing porn on those inadvertently. So the university becomes the pathway for pornography. And that's not something we can have at UC, is it? I mean, until one of our campuses starts researching porn, and it's going to happen, right? I mean, what do we have? Psychedelics being researched at Berkeley now, and all kinds of different study programs, but it's not an academic thing for porn. It's literally, the pirates out on the internet are using our hosting and our DNS to get their stuff out to their customers, and we don't need that. So that's like the big security issue. But knowing things about your domains and knowing, what websites you have, like Jeremy said, the big issue is the metapixel. Well, in California, I think we are all located in California, are we not? Anybody here not located in California? Didn't think so. Okay. So the metapixel is technically illegal in California because it tracks the individual, it tracks their IP address, and their privacy is, cross-site. So, Anna there at the back of the room might be on a page with the pixel, the metapixel cookie on it, and then go to buy something for her babies, and then go to her running store that she likes to shop at online. And now, she's going to start getting advertised for baby joggers, the things that you carry your baby around on your back for, even though she might already have 10 of them. Because I think if I know Anna, she probably does. Because I work for Meta. No, just kidding. Anna and I worked together for years. So that's, it's really critical and it's really important. But when it comes to the area that I'm in, and I, those of you in the room who don't know me, I am the accessibility lead for the UC system. I am, the resident expert on what is all accessibility for people with disabilities. And I am, the evangelist for accessibility at Berkeley. And when it comes to accessibility, you can't tell how well you're doing for accessibility if you don't know what's out there. You don't have, I had no idea about this program that was still out there from 1999. Just so you all know, it was called Boing. Like, what on earth was Boing? Well, Boing was a distributed computing system, but sure didn't sound like that when we first went to the website. And if you don't know about it, we can't check it for accessibility. There's only so much you can do when you don't know. And the more you know, the more you can do, and the more you can educate, and the more power you have to get the things done that you need to do. So I'm going to give the stage back to Jeremy now, unless there's any questions for me before I step down. Okay. Come on, Dwight.
Thank you, Lucy. So ultimately, as Lucy said, we all have this problem. UC Berkeley was trying to identify their top 200 sites. We kind of walked through the metapixel problem that we have. And just ultimately, none of us are aware of all the websites that are on our campus. But I'd like to bring up Gavin Colburn, who can help us identify and solve that problem.
Thanks, Liz. Hi, everyone. I'm Gavin from Little Forest. It's a great pleasure to be here today. I've come from London, and yeah, it's wonderful to meet you all. So thank you for your time. Yeah, so what does this say? So yeah, getting the big picture. So the internet practically started in universities. So it's one of the reasons why you now have such massive estates of websites, and everyone who's done a research program and a project, and then maybe done another PhD, how do they show the results of their work? And often this is contractually to get the sponsorship they need to actually record that in a website. And so these websites have, often been published 15 years ago and are still available today. Often that's a great thing. It's important, we need to make sure they represent the brand correctly, that they are also keeping up with industry standards. It's a massive challenge. There's security, there's brand compliance, there's accessibility, there's privacy. So there's a lot of things that we need to focus on in terms of finding these. So what I'm going to do is just give you a brief demo today of what the report looks like, how it works, and and what we can do from that. So we can need to. It's okay. All righty. I'll have a look at the Berkeley report today.
Before he
So-
brings up the report, how many websites does everybody think we have at Berkeley?
In our show.
Okay.
Does anyone remember how many there were? So the two primary ways that we find your website, and at least 3 data sources. So sure, yeah. Yeah, I can't see the screen that well, so please do let me know if there's something in the way. Okay, great. Okay, so we have a number. There's 2 primary ways we find the website. So the first is we look at the top level domains. So we'll look at berkeley.edu, do the domain registrant information. And so there'll be something in there to then find other top level domains. So you might also own berkeley.com, berkeley.net, berkeley-hospital.org. And so that's a horizontal way of going across other top level domains that are owned by Berkeley. And then with each of those top level domains, you can then what's called enumerate the subdomains. So you can look for, and you find like test.berkeley.edu, sally.berkeley.edu, etc. We recommend just starting with your main site and finding the subdomains, because you will find so many in that. And then go on to, once you're happy with and you've curated a list. So Jeremy's team at San Diego done a great job of the list curation already. They've only been working on it for a couple of months and have gotten that number really down, because you do get you can't get false positives with subdomains. What you do get is a lot of noise, particularly from DNS. The other places that we find the subdomains are we look in Google and other search engines and find unique subdomains of your domain. And then the other place that gives a lot of information is the SSL certificate database. So when someone has registered a site and they've gotten a certificate for that site, they've had to then put dwight.berkeley.edu as the domain name with the certificate. Okay, so this is the dashboard, and there's kind of just like a spreadsheet in a sense. The columns are, they're all configurable. Many of the columns are automated. So we once we have the list, we found all the subdomains, we then send a browser to each of the addresses, and we can get any automated data from that. So any technical information you can get. The advantage of this over a spreadsheet is that you can keep your business metadata as you would in a spreadsheet. So the site owner is the typical sort of area that people will want to record. That site owner could be a group, could be a person. It could also be like a college, a school, a faculty, a department. And you can then still resend and re-update the automated data at the touch of a button and on schedule. The challenge when you have it in a spreadsheet is that you're keeping the business metadata, but the data like the accessibility score, for example, will go out of date, almost immediately. So you can scroll through the list and you start to see all the websites and so forth, and you start to get all the information. Okay, I can't scroll that way. Each of these columns is configurable, and there's some really cool stuff we can do with it. I want to just show you this one, which is we can expand the screenshots. And so instead of having to click on every site, you can get a really good flavor for where the site is at, what the quality is like. So Lucy, I'm looking at one here that just says Bad request, 400. That's like the fourth down in the list. It's reunions.berkeley.edu. And so it's a really quick way of identifying. Oops. Okay, that's enlarging the screenshot. You get a flavor for where the brand is, how they're doing, if there's a privacy challenge. And there's some beautiful sites there as well. This is the kind of fun bit I find, that really the breadth of the organization is seen here. We then, the top of the screen, can create what we call views. And views, you can take any piece of data and assign it to a view and assign it to a user. So some of the things we do, Lucy wanted to find, for good reason, any sites that use accessibility overlays. The reason being they actually cause a lot of challenges with accessibility. So it's one of the things you can do is we fingerprint the code of the accessibility overlay, and then we'll tell you, is that technology running on that site or not? We can also do like the Lighthouse scores. So if I go into the Lighthouse scores, that will then show us the accessibility score. It's only the automated accessibility score. And a small rant on that. If you have a very high automated accessibility score, while that in itself is a good thing, it's not enough to pause there. A lot of people will see like a score like 89% for their accessibility, and they think, hey, we're doing really well. Our support team gave me a good idea on how to actually think about that, which is automated accessibility will only record about 40% of the errors that are on your page. So you've actually got 89% of 40%. So it's definitely not a place to, where you want to start with automated accessibility is 100%. So that's just something to think about. So here we have all the accessibility scores, the performance scores, the SEO scores, best practices. And then to go back to the benefits, this is really thinking about the brand, about your customer experience. If someone wants to come study at Berkeley, we want to make sure that they find the right information on the right site. So you can set these up as many as you like. I'll also just show you the technologies view. We also have a very cool thing, which is called code search. So if you found a component on one of your sites, and perhaps it's got an accessibility challenge or something else, and you want to know where else this component is used, you can just find that piece of code and it'll tell you, okay, it's also found on these other 23 sites in your domains. Takes a little bit of time to load across this network, actually. There we go. Hey, please, yeah.
Somebody asked, how about squiggly domains like www.example.edu/user or www.example.edu/.
Okay. So it's hard to translate that. I think it's to do with the URL formatting. So a site can be anything like /user/ or it could be, a very common issue is how to know the difference between a site that has an address that has a / at the end and one that doesn't. And actually, so in a spreadsheet, there could be two records and you could have both of them. It's just an example of some of the data. We do have tools that help you to filter that out. It is definitely a challenge of how you can address those. There's a lot of data in there. Also, so we can do things like in the settings, you can exclude a lot of, so you might find printer.UC Davis and you'd say, okay, I don't want to see anything with printer. Another common one that comes up is like DHCP. And you can take the URL patterns and exclude them. It's important that they're still in the report, but we hide them from you because you will always find them every time you run a schedule, a report. The thing is that I call it you're really looking for the needles in the hay. There's a lot of hay when you go and get all these addresses. But to get to the good information, you really want to be able to hide some of it as well. So this final one I just wanted to show you is all the technologies are running. You can see, for example, that there's Google Analytics or what type of, what versions of PHP are there. You can also go further with this kind of information. And so we're also looking at kind of WordPress versions, Drupal versions. Is Drupal version 7 the one that's out of date already? Hasn't reached. Yeah, and then you can do things like you could search for Drupal, find all the Drupal, or search for Drupal 6, which you might have a few of. Pretty much everyone still seems to be running. Are there 3 still? Okay. You can export everything to a spreadsheet. And also where we often recommend starting is you have better data than anyone else, actually, because you have access to all the external data as well as your internal. We recommend you giving us a spreadsheet of what you have and any metadata that you may have, like your business owner, the purpose of the site, etc. Anything that will be useful, and we can import those as columns for you. So I searched on Drupal and we found 600 sites with the word Drupal in it. We could take that further and look, yeah, there's a version 8, is that? Version 7, is that a 6? Yeah, traffic.berkeley. Yeah. Okay. And it doesn't probably look like it has an accessibility statement or policy on this from a quick scan. But those are the kind of things that you can do a code search for, and then we'll tell you, is it there or not? Sorry, I've lost the window. Okay. Overlays report. I think the overlays report then is doing a code search. So when you search for a piece of code, we'll show you the context around that code so you can be certain about what you're looking for. Is it there? So we'll tell you if it's there or not, and we'll also then show you around that code what is there. Dwight's a great audience member. It's very reassuring, the snoring in the background. Okay, so this is the final report I'll show you. This is just indicating if we find the word that you looked for or not. If I scroll across, I think, are we seeing the context there? So I think there's some context. I can't see the screen very well. Or are these the email addresses? We also pull out the email address if we find 1 or 2 or 3 on the page. The reason this helps you is that you can get in touch with those people a bit easier. The perspective is obviously we want to make sure we're in touch with the site owner, the representative, and make sure they understand the responsibility. You know, the site does need to be accessible. Hopefully offer them some service that will help them to make the site accessible, make it secure, keep up with the compliance. And I think then there's a question around the approach and the culture that you want to do. I know with a lot of universities, they're so decentralized and it's difficult, even though it's the law, you have to follow this. You have what we'd call in the UK fiefdoms, where you have people who will like say, no, this is what we're doing and that's it. And it's quite difficult to then, have a conversation. I know some organizations are starting to take the point of saying, okay, we'll give you till this date, at the 1st of February, for you to make your site accessible. If it's not at that time, we'll then actually switch it off from a DNS perspective, put up a holding page. And so it's kind of what culture do you want and how do you want to approach that communication is an interesting question. I think that's probably it from the demo side. Any questions? There's one online. Let's go.
Records are those? I'm curious what the www records are. Those tracked separately from the primary records?
So www is just a subdomain. So
That's what a lot of campus sites are, both reunions.berkeley and www. So I'm curious if that site's being counted twice, essentially, in the overall list.
it could well be.
Yeah, if it's not redirecting, for example. Got it.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's why one of the first things we show is the redirect code.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool.
And if it redirects multiple times, or often sites do this. So this site, RUP, does a 302, so that's a redirect, and then it resolves to a 200.
So theoretically, then that that record wouldn't be hosted that wouldn't be counted separately in this report if the status code says it's been redirected.
Exactly. And it's kind of an option of what you would like to do. You either want to show two records. Most people want to show the final record
Makes
where it
sense.
resolves to.
Thank you.
Another question.
At risk of getting embarrassed in public, can I ask to see the site that I work on? Or is that not okay?
Let's hope it's in the list. Okay.
I'm courageous.
Have I clicked in the search box? Could you give me the name?
Sure, it's lib
LIB.
.berkeley.edu.
Right, the library.
I might regret this, but we'll see.
I told you yesterday, my first job as a 9-year-old was as a librarian. I love libraries. Is that? Does it say processing? Thank you.
While that's loading, curious if this is a service that costs money, if we wanted to take advantage of it at other UCs, what's the process for that?
There is a commercial license. We give that on an annual basis. We have an agreement across the UC system that is available for you to take advantage of. And we're currently working with Berkeley and San Diego. Thank you. Jesse, is this?
The top level, sorry, I'm looking for the top level subdomain lib.berkeley.edu. These sites are all very interesting. No, that's a virtual machine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing you find. Yeah. So you'll often find test sites, staging sites,
Yeah,
that kind of thing, development sites, digital lib, CGI lib.
If this
Guys.
takes too much time, it's okay.
No, it's fine.
I'm just super curious.
But it has shown work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's also sites that I do not recognize, which is alarming.
And I'm pretty sure they're all .lib. So they're all under that subdomain. I'm not sure that we're
All right,
listing.
if it's a Pantheon site and we are handling the domain name via Nginx redirection, would it show up as the Pantheon URL?
Is it? lib.
Although I did see I did see Pantheon hosted sites there, which is interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, which is in and of itself interesting.
And yeah, it's as again, I said, we're continuously looking for new sources and we
Sure.
always ask, please give us your list as well.
Yeah.
To augment it. Yeah, so it looks like we've got the subdomains of your subdomain, but not your subdomain
Right.
in the list. You know, this is, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we need to add that in. There are a couple of online questions.
Yeah, we had an online question. Can the site owners access this information themselves so that they can see their improvements tracked in real time?
There we go.
So you can set it up in many ways where you can give the site owners access and create accounts for them, or you can just have your administrators work on it. I mean, we don't have SSO yet, and that's the key, is that there is no SSO integration yet. That's kind of the next big challenge for me to give Gavin, is to get in common, because as he starts to work with more US universities, he's going to need in common anyways. Does that answer your question?
It's definitely something we can set up. So we support SAML 2, single sign-on. It's quite straightforward to set up. And one of the unis recently has come up with a different approach to what I'd encountered before. And I thought it was quite interesting, which is they actually are just giving everyone who has authentication in the uni system to see the list and then to claim a site, to say, okay, this college XYZ is my website. And that then goes to the central administrator and they can review and approve that.
And yeah, that answered the question from Milton.
Is there another question there? No? Any other questions? Thank you so much. Anything else? Over to you. Yeah, thank you.
I just want to thank everybody for attending. It's for us, I think it was quite daunting to look at a number of 40,000 and being able to pare that down at least gets us to a point where we can start coming up with strategies on how we're going to address the problems and prioritize the problems. And I think that that's very empowering. So thank you all. I'm sorry, you're right. We do have, yes, I forgot all about the slide that we added at the end. How do I get back to? No, my fault. I'm sorry. How do I get back to? Thank you. That, so Gavin did have his team come up with numbers for everyone. So if you are interested in your totals, they are listed here, and perhaps that might prompt some questions.
I was just gonna say.
Yeah, subdomains, right. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mostly just a joke. I was confused about the low numbers, but that makes sense because it's just the subdomains versus the primary ones. So thank you.
Right. All right. Thank you very much.
That's all for joining. This session survey will be available on the CVent app afterwards. So we look forward to getting any feedback from you.